Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last panel for today in Theater 2. Just a quick housekeeping note that this session is qualified for continuing education credits. And if you're a member seeking attendance documentation, please be sure to scan your badge, the QR code on the bottom of the badge at the scanner, which is just at this tall table behind the AV table. So scanners will shut off 15 minutes post-session, so make sure you get your badge scanned. And to qualify, this session has to go 60 minutes, so if you have Q&A, stretch it out. And then more information can be found on our website for continuing education. And at this time, I will turn it over to our distinguished panel with Shivaji to kick it off.
Happy afternoon. I hope all of you got the exercise from the fire drill earlier today to wake you all up. Today's panel is on securing the foundation, the role of quality data in driving reliable AI outcomes. I guess we're all sick and tired of hearing about AI panels, and now we're switching gears towards how quality data, authoritative data, golden data, whatever name you want to put it, plays a huge part in how our AI outcomes are, whatever the applications are. The panel will explore dual challenges in ensuring data integrity, protecting sensitive information while emphasizing the robust data governance that directly impacts the reliability and ethical use of AI. There are 6 key discussion points. So we're going to talk about nexus of data security and quality, data integrity, emerging threats, best practices, and stuff. We are joined by a very, very distinguished panel. We'll start with the person immediately to my left, Captain Rogers from the Coast Guard, who's the Deputy Chief Data and Artificial Intelligence Officer. Captain, thank you for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Derek, our Air Force A1 CTO for the U.S. Air Force, of course. And then we have Mr. David Carroll, who's the Vice President of Cyber Capability at GDIT at the very end. And, of course, Mr. Bobby, who's the Vice President of Cyber Accelerator at Leidos, leading their research group. So with that, just want to get started. If each of the panelists can give us their 50,000 feet view of the roles they play, so that then when we dive into the questions, we can address them a little better. Let's start with you, Captain.
Okay, Dan Rogers, Deputy Chief Data and Artificial Intelligence Officer for the Coast Guard. So that's the title. The role is basically accelerating the use of both data and AI inside the Coast Guard. So the goal is an all-domain suite using an integrated data environment. Each domain has a data team, and we provide the overall infrastructure and support to then scale across the enterprise, both the ingestion and, bronze, silver, gold on the data to then be able to deploy it for enterprise use. So that's our overall goal. My primary overall goal for the organization is one of, again, scale. So not just single use cases in particular domains, but how do we build the overall infrastructure or scaffolding to allow for a full deployment across all domains using that data environment and the data that we have.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Derek. I'm CTO. I have a couple other roles like cat herder, therapist, janitor, just cleaning up a lot of the things that have been left behind, but also as CTO, moving ahead, making sure that we have our investments into what we need for not just for today, but in the future as well. So Air Force A1 is everything manpower. It's the things that we need for the Air Force. So that means training people to be pilots, the solutions to train, selecting pilots, access to healthcare. It's amazing. Our portfolio is $768 million. We have a separate landing zone. We sponsored Okta, Salesforce, ServiceNow into the DoD back in 2018. We have a separate landing zone, multi-cloud landing zone. We are employing an AI strategy that's very unique to the Air Force. I've been in this role since July. In prior role, I worked with the Army, managing the Sea Army within the agency ECMA. So a broad stroke of different experiences led me to where I'm at here today. I'm ecstatic to be here, to give you guys a snapshot of what we're doing in the Air Force A1, and got to know these folks that are sitting around me, but I'm so happy to be here. Thank you again. Thanks.
Hi, so I'm Bobby Sharman. I'm with Leidos. I'm the director of what we call our Cyber Accelerator. And your first question might be, what in the world is a Cyber Accelerator? So we are an organization within the Office of Technology within Leidos, and that we are one of the innovation engines across the enterprise. So we support full spectrum cyber operations, but primarily really anticipating technology needs, helping define the technology roadmap and the technology investments that are needed today to meet tomorrow's challenges to support the rest of the enterprise.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Carroll. Those of you who saw the last panel, they called me out. I am about 2 months out of the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, where I headed mission engineering. So little programs like Einstein, the Cyber Analytic Data System, Malware Next Gen, just little small things that no one depends on. I've recently transitioned to GDIT, where my role is Vice President of Cyber Capability, Engineering, and Strategy. So I'd like to think I'm pretty much the same guy, different logo, and having a lot of fun in both roles. These folks are like my family. It's everybody on the service side. Prior to CISA, I'd worked for Admin Security and Trust at Google as a technical program director. So another little platform called Gmail, about 3.8 billion users. And a lot of data, and through the last decade, I try to tell folks data in the cyberspace as well as in the digital transformation space is the key to the things that we want to achieve with artificial intelligence. And if we're going to operate against, in this case, adversaries at machine speed, if you hear me speak, usually it's that. When I started at CISA, for example, we were at about 4 hours for an advanced persistent threat. By the time I left, we were at less than an hour, and my goal was to be almost instantaneous within 2 years, and do things like cyber prompt analysts. I'm still going to do that, and I'm having fun across a wide space with my cyber community of excellence, and bringing a little bit of AI to that and a little bit of volume and value trade-off is the evolution of what we do. So and then I like to end with, it's just math. We'll be okay.
Thank you, David. So with that, I'd like to ask Derek to start us off by addressing the question on how do you prioritize data security versus data quality when developing AI systems?
I'm first?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
The big dog gets the first question.
First through the door. Okay. One of the things when people mention AI, what is AI? Right? There's two prerequisites to AI, two big ones, and DevSecOps and Enterprise Cloud. So if I'm going to protect the data, I'm going to ensure that I have the necessary ingredients in that DevSecOps. I'm going to protect it. And the Enterprise Cloud, I'm going to make sure I'm going to have those necessary ingredients as well. So wait a minute. What are the three main pillars for cloud security? It's different than it's on-prem. And this is the things that every public speaking event, I always bring this in. For cloud cybersecurity are three pillars: governance, architecture, and risk management, the three pillars. So if I'm going to protect the data, I'm going to have to ensure that my cloud environment, all the tools, everything I have in there that actually uses and interacts with the data is secure. So it's not just the particular tool, it's not just the particular data, it's also it's all of it. And so I have to ensure that the governance is in place. I have to ensure that the architecture is right. And I'm also employing risk management on a continuous basis. So it's not just the RMF, I'm talking the practice of gauging risk and managing that risk. And especially when you're working with AI and you're working with cloud, you're continuously doing that. So for any solution, for any AI tool or anything, we're ensuring that cybersecurity or security is always at the top of the list. So many times in the past, we would employ all these wonderful tools and having cybersecurity in the back, or at least now, believe it or not, it's in the front. It's a completely different mindset. And so at any inception of any effort, whether it be a proof of concept or anything that's being in production, you're still going to have cybersecurity at the top of the list. And having your teams that put this together, whether they're specialized in data analysis, they have to think cybersecurity continuously. And so it's a change in culture. So the priority is always cybersecurity, but it's also the change in culture, because many times as you're dealing with this, you're dealing with folks that have been doing it on-prem. Change that mindset, but it also, again, gives that opportunity to move the needle forward for whatever use case that you're trying to meet.
Thank you, Derek. Bobby, in your cyber labs that you tout in Leidos, I'm sure you're doing a lot of forward-thinking work in this. What is your opinion?
I agree with that, right? And to David's point, right, what is AI? AI is math on mission data, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And what you're finding, if you were to talk about AI technologies 5 or 10 years ago, right, before sort of the ubiquity of transformer architectures and large language models, oftentimes your workflow might be you gather some data, you train a model, and then you deploy it. Maybe it's a neural network-based architecture. But generally speaking, you weren't doing or weren't seeing a lot of online learners, pattern of life learners, continual learners, whereas now with the proliferation of large language models, with ubiquity of even as we're moving towards agentic architectures, what you're really seeing is that attack surface is even greater than it used to be. If you prompt a large language model today, you want to know, hey, what is the weather? It should have the ability to reach out to additional data systems beyond what it was initially trained on, and that attack surface is greater than ever. So they're really intrinsically linked and interconnected, right? High quality AI-based systems have to be secure, and you've got to incorporate RMF and basic cybersecurity hygiene and principles from the outset.
Thank you. So, Captain Rogers, you spoke about scaffoldings and tool sets, which I found very, very intriguing when talking about AI data security. Can you give us a sense of how that data security and data quality work within that framework?
So the way that we've set it up is we started with the tools, again, with cybersecurity as the overall beginning of what we did to create our overall integrated data environment. So it has the governance, it's a secure environment. And then we secured it further by basically saying the only way you're getting into here is if you're one of our domain data teams. So 9, 10 data domains across the Coast Guard: logistics, finance, operations. So there's 9 to cyber, intel. Anyway, there's about 9 of these things. And so across all of those, what I've been trying to do, and that's what I mean by scaffolding, is create these minimally viable teams. So the only way you access my secure environment is if you are fully competent, you represent the overall team, and then we have 5 roles that kind of constitute a minimally viable team. I'm an executive data steward, a technical data steward, a business data steward, a data scientist, and a data engineer. So with those 5 people, I can get you started. Right now you can have access to my tools, and it's almost like a Chick-fil-A kind of thing, right? I just want you to get a taste, because a lot of these folks have been running these kinds of things, and we got analysts all over the Coast Guard, but they're on their own computer, they're doing their own thing, they're pulling off of wherever they happen to be able to find the data, on-prem, not on-prem, off the internet, and all of the stuff that would make it consistent. Like, okay, there's a tag, so I say I pull it out of business intelligence, and it's tagged for the date-time group that I actually pulled it down. What's the first thing they delete off the spreadsheet? The date-time group of when they pulled it down. So then everybody argues about who's got the right information because the background of what they're actually doing is wrong. So by having these minimally viable teams, and again, it allows us to then move towards scale. So, because once I have a team in each one of these domains, then I can augment those teams. I can add more scientists, I can add more engineers, I can get across more subdomains, I can answer more questions as I prioritize those overall use cases. So it's a little bit more. So I don't want to say I assume the cybersecurity piece, but we build it into our overall tooling and then restrict the access. I mean, that's kind of the primary way we've been doing it.
Thank you so much. David, you have worked across both sides of the aisle, kind of, and you led one of the most mission-critical teams in the country. Can you share an example of some high-quality, secure data directly that led to successful AI outcome?
I can. So story goes, and again, I've worked on the military side as a reserve officer. I've worked at big corporations, worked at big financial institutions where, ironically, I was called denial as a service when I wanted to put security into the CI/CD pipeline, which I always found fun. I disrespected my data people, so I went and got a post-grad, so I wouldn't act like an idiot around data people anymore. But the story goes, last fall I was traveling with one of my colleagues and down meeting our international counterparts, and my data science chief, I had about a 50-person data science team, which was pretty big for DHS, let alone CISA. But given what we do, we had 3 products. We built large models on very notional data fused with national intelligence information. That's time memoriam. That's what Einstein's been doing since 2004. Second one was, hey, we don't know how to do that at scale. We don't know how to get that in there. We're an agency, or we're a critical infrastructure piece that just doesn't know how to do that. So let us help you. We had a multi-cloud analytic environment called Maple, and we brought them into that. Third one is, I'm just somebody in a real small agency that's trying to protect wildlife or something, and I'm the biologist, I'm the CIO, I'm the CEO. What do I do? And then it's just give me a pane of glass with the top 5 things that I need. All that goes back to data quality. All of that goes in here. But the cool story was I get a call, and other than the massive time difference, I think I was in Australia. So it was, hey, we built this model, and it was a Volt Typhoon model. So the actor. And we've been testing it on government, because we have access to all government data. It's a big model based on government data. Okay. They said, yeah, but somebody outside wants it. And I said, well, who are they? And they are a critical infrastructure provider. And so the magic there is, if when you train those models, you have quality data, you can get it down. And as we know, the more data you get into that trained model, the better accuracy you're going to have if you can get the data quality into the test model, right? So I said, okay. And they're a big telecom company that really, these are important, right? These are national infrastructure. So they, or I should say media company, but so we sent them the model, and we sent them one of our data scientists with an ETL guide, extract, transform, and load. And the legend has it that they found the threat in hours rather than a week or 2 weeks. So that all goes back to, can you trust the data? Can you trust the components of that data? Am I drifting? Do I have a bias that I don't understand? That's all the core of this. If you can't do that, you'll never get to this, and that makes a difference for national defense. That makes a difference for critical infrastructure every day, all day. So whatever product you're doing, whatever volume and value you're trading off, just remember that it all starts by respecting those people downrange that are doing the right thing to make sure that data is trustworthy.
Thank you so much, David. You kind of built up to the next question, Captain Rogers. What specific steps does your organization take to ensure data sets are unbiased and complete during the AI development lifecycle?
So I'll just start with, we are a little nascent in some of these things in the sense of depending on which domain. So similar to the A1 thing, we actually started in the HR domain. And did a lot of our pilot testing. So we've moved from kind of the pilot approach to now maybe more to guinea pig now. So we've gone from pilot to guinea pig. So we're making good progress on what we're doing, but I don't have the scale that these guys are talking yet. And one of the problems that we have in the Coast Guard is just the sheer breadth of overall missions that we perform. So when you have 11 different mission sets, here's a good metaphor for you guys. So those little games that you have where you're like rolling the little ball bearings around and you're trying to get them in the holes? Yeah, that's what data transformation looks like inside the organization. But let me make it worse for you. We run it more like a Ouija board. Everybody gets their fingers on there, and they're all trying to help you. Like, no, I'm going to help you get it in the hole. Like, here. Stop doing that. So that's a lot of what we're dealing with across because you have to balance, okay, I have those that have the knowledge, right? Again, the data scientists, those that shouldn't be disrespected, just to be clear. So that they know what they're doing, but they're buried typically inside the organization. And then I got the senior leaders who best of intentions, but don't necessarily know what data transformation means to them, right? And then I'll make it more difficult. Then you throw in the vendors who want to come in and just, as long as I throw it on a map, I'm going to wow them, right? And the data quality behind the stuff that I'm sticking on the map, terrible. Like, this is sample data. I'm just throwing something on there. But wow, look at the cool data that's on the map, right? Not realizing that, again, the back end of this is the hard part. Like, I can do those same visualization. I can stick it on a map too, right? I have that capability organic to the organization. So that's a lot of the difficulty for what you're describing is, like, doing it's the little red hen thing. I'm sure y'all have heard y'all have seen the little YouTube video on the little red hen, like who's going to clean the data, who's going to sort the data, who's going to govern the data, right? And then, but that's mostly what we're dealing with, and we're doing it in this very siloed way because everybody owns their own. So the most important piece of what we're trying to do, again, in building the scaffolding, is to make sure that there's a shared approach. So if you're the domain data owner, you own the data. I'm not going to tell you what use case to pursue. I'm not going to tell you how. I'm going to give you the processes. Like, you're going to have to do it my way. You come and you play with my toys. You don't go back to your home with my toys. You're going to play. I'm like an only child. So that's the way that we have to do it. But the domain still gets to decide, right? Whatever it is they want to prioritize on what data they go after. And then our overall goal is to reach inside for, as the domains are benefiting, that I find the things that benefit the enterprise. And then I'm reaching in and I'm saying, okay, that's not just for you. The enterprise could benefit from that. And then that's the repository I'm actually after more than anything else, is as I get more and more in the overall repository of enterprise data that's already been evaluated for rights impacting and for privacy and all that stuff, that then becomes the leverage point where the enterprise itself can start leveraging this for better overall decision making.
Acting Captain.
I'm going to add, so full disclosure, I'm retired Coast Guard in 2019, and I think he emphasized the things the challenges, but I want to echo even more so. The Coast Guard is very, very small. And so back in 2016, they officially said we're .mil. And the challenges of keeping up with all the .mil requirements, but the amount of things that the Coast Guard does worldwide, I don't think folks even realize that, and especially with IT. And the things that he talked about, silos, is tremendous in the Coast Guard. There's a lot of culture shifts that happen and still need to happen. And I don't envy you in your job, but and again, Coast Guard's near dear to my heart. This is where I wore the uniform just like him. Now I'm in the Air Force. I see it on a different side, but I just wanted to emphasize that the good work that you do, and again, the challenges are very unique, unlike what I see in the Air Force and prior in the Army. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Derek. If you can give the mic, talking about data poisoning, we spoke about this earlier, in an organization your scale, how do you potentially detect and mitigate data tampering, data degeneration in large-scale AI projects, or just data tampering and data poisoning as a problem set?
So one of the things that we did, and I'm going to start with a little bit, going back a little bit. So I started this job back in July. We actually promulgated data analytics and AI strategy. It was huge, and it's somewhat transformational for the Air Force, because as any enterprise, especially for us, we got everything from credit card data, we got things from childcare, we got you name it. The spread is tremendous, and so the risk is there, right? Your traditional cyber attacks, et cetera, which you just referenced to, the poisoning. So we deal with selecting the officials for promotion, and we're using AI models to help. Now, we always have a human that has that final say. But let me go back to the strategy. And so in that strategy, what we outlined is what we call My Data. So as I mentioned, we have the data spread out everywhere. So we're now creating a golden record of that data, having that central repository where you can run the models, no matter what silo, but we're essentially creating that not authoritative source, but golden record. And we're going to protect it. And when we do run the models, we'll be able to ensure that we're going to retain the models, because so many questions, what decisions were made, we'll at least have something, the foundation to go back. But again, protecting it. There's even with this tremendous amount of spread, and there's opportunity for folks to inject information that could have an impact on the service, believe it or not, like health information, right? We're determining, helping, again, folks that are they going to retain in the military or not. That has a huge impact on the number of the service, the readiness of the service. And so going back to the strategy, what we outlined, again, creating that golden record, that My Data, where we're going to host it and be able to run all the different tools and protect it. So with the spread, it's all under different security, different stack. No, we're going to put everything under the similar stack so that we can monitor it to ensure that there's something, nobody poisons it or changes things, so then thus it has an impact on readiness. So I'm going to plug the strategy for the third, fourth time, but it's big because, any organization, so for anyone that's worked for an agency or is in an agency today, highly emphasized to put it in writing so that gets everybody in the same page, so to prevent all of the issues that we're talking about here today. I'm really happy about the strategy because we're actually employing it. We're putting it together with all the right ingredients to ensure we can deal with any of the issues that we face today, also in the future too.
Thank you. David, data integrity use cases, anything comes to mind that we can talk about in this panel?
So, I got kind of a dual government background. So I've been on the offensive side at Fleet Cyber Command. I've been on the defensive side. So, what is the worst thing that you can do when indicators and warnings are coming in from a major system, whether it's a weapon system, a cyber system, or just trying to get people from one place to another or make sure that they're healthy? Sometimes more isn't better. It's not more. You just tinge the data a bit. You change reality, and that changes the mission because we depend on the data. So, how do you fix that? There's a lot of talk right now, and it's not just talk. Whether it's hyperscale engineering, so hydration and dehydration of data. When a data element changes and you don't know why, you can go back into the pipeline and you can basically tell the pipeline to go ahead and revamp that. That doesn't just happen because you failed an ATO or an RMF set of controls. If your area under the curve and you're measuring AI with AI, if those two curves don't go together and they start moving one way or another, and you're not sure why, best thing to do is send it back through the pipeline and reinstantiate it, right? And see if you can get back to that baseline. And that kind of even goes back to the old gold disk days, right? You're just doing it at hyperscale with data, which seems like it's hard, but it's you can get it done. And then making sure that you have things like zero trust in order, because at that point, then all the substrates, the things that you care about, the hard part that both the captain and Mr. Kalinsky were talking about, it's if you don't care, if you know the identity, if you know the context of the user, and you know the location, you're pretty much, everything kind of becomes plumbing underneath. You can open yourself up to multiple data sets coming in. You can and then scale becomes something that you can achieve. I'll go back to, if you don't get those basic things in order, that ghost in the machine gets in there. I've seen it. We've actually done, my prior team, vulnerability management team that came in, we would do MLSecOps red teaming against our own infrastructure, and you just twinge it a little bit, and then you watch the vector go logarithmic, which, basically the line just goes straight up, and you're in a different place looking at different adversaries or, looking at different data that doesn't help you.
Thank you. So, Derek, coming back to you, talking about just moving it a little bit in terms of data theft. How significant is the risk of data theft in AI systems?
Oh, my turn?
Yes, sir.
Oh, big time.
Okay.
I am actually going to switch gears a little bit. And so prior to this, I mentioned I worked for the Army. I was with Sea Army, ECMA, Enterprise Cloud Management Agency. So I was Cloud Services Division Chief, CTO, and Chief Architect. And I did that for about 2 years. And during that tenure, we had some major security incidents. And there were 5 were self-inflicted, 2 were not. And believe it or not, would you believe the biggest target were people data? the Army people, right? Believe it or not. And again, with some of the things that I do in our Air Force, we employ models, we employ, and I got so many lessons learned out of that, especially when those two that weren't self-inflicted, they were somebody from the outside. And you would think like people data, right? It would be something less of a priority. Believe it or not, it's one of your biggest priorities. And again, with the theft of data, yeah, I mean, there's one, I can think in one major incident where it was all of the forms that people filled out in the Army. Now, an adversary would love to know, again, the people data. Again, AI is something that is emerging. Going back to what I started with one of my previous answers, again, it all goes down to your cloud environment where you do all this work, right? All where the data sits, where the tools are. Again, making sure that the environment, the landing zone is secure. The data is going to be secure. All the points of coming in and out, all the hybrid connections. So, again, think for all of you here today, AI is a great tool. It's a great practice. It's a great emerging technology. But we always have to think about it from a secure perspective. And believe it or not, sometimes the things that you may think are low priority, actually the biggest priority, first and foremost. But I can't really go into some of the specifics of what happened, but you can pretty much fill in the blanks. Again, when you're employing some of these DevSecOps tools, these AI models, you have to ensure that you protect the models, you protect the tools. You have to look at all the different vectors that come in and out, especially for a large enterprise. Army has 1.4 million people today. And, of course, people coming in and out, retiring, et cetera. And then Air Force, about 700, some change, maybe a little less, and Space Force. But you think about it, from our nation's security, again, with all of the emergent technologies being used today in the cloud, we really have to think differently. It's happening, trust me, more than folks even want to admit, but it is. So again, for all you listening today, when you're employing AI, please do not discount security. Put it at the top of your list. My soapbox. Thanks.
Thank you. Quick, Captain Rogers, just on this subject, based on your scaffolding concept and pushing it down the ranks to leverage by those data scientists or data groups, how do you even kind of go to address theft of data, which can happen at different levels within your vast enterprise?
Oh, our theft of data is actually much worse because we give it away. And this is one of the problems with the generative AI models out there is that, and it's one of the difficulties in an organization that's known to be very agile, very responsive, come up with their own answers, and we reward that. Hey, you're creative and you figured out how to get it done. Security isn't necessarily the thing that they're thinking most about, and so they're taking content. I mean, I just give you a quick example. Pilots love this, but anyway, maybe you deal with this in the Air Force. So our pilots in the Coast Guard love assistance on things that aren't flying. Right? Anything, right? So, hey, I really would like to write an evaluation on an officer. I want to write an award, but it's too much work to actually sit here and type. I'm going to use a generative AI model, and I'll take all the content of everything that they've done, and I'll dump it into a commercial overall product, and ta-da! We did a recent overall study, terabytes of data that we've put into ChatGPT just because we don't have solid rigor in the way that we manage this stuff because we're not providing them tools inside our own service that meet the requirements. And so because they don't know what they're doing in the sense of the security ramifications of these actions, right? Oh, it's helping me. So I'm gonna do it. And they're literally uploading all kinds of content in there. And you know how these large language models work. It doesn't take a whole lot of content to then create an overall profile on a person. And it's amazing what's actually out there. So I wish I had a good story on this one, but it's actually a pretty terrible story, which then gives the cause for action on providing. It's why the scaffolding, it's why the data teams, it's why inside the secure environment that we've created, that's where I'm actually building my AI marketplace, so that I can actually buy it once, and then I can recreate as an analytics product. If this is the product that you need, look, I've already bought the model. Look, I've already trained the model. Look, so you can use these things. Like, we already bought them. You don't have to buy them on your own because you're in a separate domain. Anyway, it's building the rigor around, again, the whole infrastructure. And I don't mean just IT infrastructure, but the infrastructure to include people, to include security, to include processes, to include all of those things. Because if we don't get that right, they're going to do it in the Coast Guard, they're going to do it on their own, and then we're going to lose.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. If I may add on slightly, right, that it's about reducing the friction for proper governance, compliance, or security, right? People care about the mission. They care about achieving whatever outcome they desire. And if you don't equip them with the tools to make it the standard way of operating, they're going to find the tools elsewhere, right? And that might be a commercial instance of ChatGPT if you don't provide them a local proprietary, suitable version of those types of capabilities and tools. So it's really about anticipating where the technology is going and the tools that your team will need to maintain governance, compliance, and decent cybersecurity hygiene.
With all the guardrails in place.
Absolutely.
Yep. Behind the same security. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have to make it up. There are standards out there. This is the biggest question I get, and I go, they have the data management body of knowledge. It's an ISO standard. Start there. Work out those scaffolds. Get the stanchions in place, and then work your way out. It's not going to be perfect, but sometimes we get forward to the element of what it is that is aspirational, and we forget that there are things that you can do that actually impact the change going up, and it's the good housekeeping. It's really funny. And then watching it happen when it happens. I teach as well as work. It's just a strange habit I have, but. I've asked students, I'm like, I don't care if they use GPT, but I want them to tell me, why is that data important? The heuristic side up here, we are not at convergence. And then what's really interesting is always doing a little bit of a unit, whether it's colleagues or whether it's, on my teaching side, of just going, watch how I can fool it. Right? I start with simple things like, hey, if you don't have the right questions in place, or if you're over biased, right? If you're monitoring too hard, does anybody know why the images on GPT or on Copilot can't be spelled right? Because they're afraid that they're going to hit proprietary legal issues. That's why they won't say a name. It'll look kind of weird. It's not because it doesn't know how to spell. It doesn't, it can do that. It's because they're biasing on the fact that they want to keep it open source. They want to keep it. But I'm like, how that happens? They just turned a knob. And then you see, you get into the argumentative, with the chat agents. You can actually take it in about, I've seen it as least as 5 steps, as much as 500 to get it to fail. And the human brain, our heuristics are a little bit different than that. And so I think we got a little ways to go there. But if you don't really start paying attention to the basics, kind of move those out of the way, you don't get to play with the fun stuff.
Yeah. Actually, I want to piggyback on that because I teach on the side too. And one of the things I tell my students on the same concept, I don't care if they use AI to write their papers. And the reason is because if you have a fully AI written paper, it's not going to say anything. That's the thing that I found. There's no critical thinking in these papers, right? It takes a comment, it says it 7 different ways, right? It repeats itself over and over again. So the issue I have isn't the AI. The issue I have is you didn't write me a paper, right? There's no argument embedded into this. Now, if you can do prompt management well enough to get the overall tool you're using to do the critical thinking, that means you did the critical thinking on the front end. And I'm good. That means you actually built a paper, right? And then the writing component. So it's a matter of, again, how do you partner between the tool and the person to actually produce something of value? But I'm totally with you. Like, I don't care if you use it or not. Just use it appropriately so that it actually answers the assignment requirements.
It's inevitable, right? You can't get away from it. And so, but I think it's, one of the things you, like, your students or your employees or your colleagues, when I was changing my team over at CISA, I was like, okay, you're going to be SRE. We don't have infrastructure anymore. We've got virtual machines. You're going to be site reliability engineering. Well, what is that, Dave? Here you go. Read about release authorities and CI/CD chains. Then I went to MLSecOps and AI ops, and everybody thought it was something new. And I said, no, it's and it goes to what we hear in the DoD now with RMF is dead. It's not dead. It needs to be improved. The structure's fine. The foundation's fine. It's just the way it's implemented right now is circa 2008, coming from a former RMF validator. So it's. But this is the same thing. If you don't start with that education and say, okay, this is what this is good for, and make it, and if you make it fearful, we were talking about like keeping it out of folks' hands or over governing it. That's the other dark side of this, because as we learn on the military side, users are wild animals, and recruits are wild animals. And if you give somebody a reason, you can't patch humanity. They'll go after it, and they are the fastest polymorphic machine in existence. And so I try to end that always positively and say, you got the better machine learning and you got the better supercomputer. It's on your shoulders. Use it and be critical, because the GPT can't be yet.
It doesn't know how.
Thank you so much. So, Bobby, I want to start with you on this one. One of the things we want to do as an industry is arm Captain Rogers and Derek with the ability, and this is on topic of synthetic data. How do you build AI systems that are resilient to corrupted or manipulated training data? Means what technologies can we bring forward to support these fine gentlemen?
Right. So one of the techniques that we employ is sort of, if you want to think about it from a cybersecurity perspective, sort of that co-OCO, DCO development, right? If you want to build a system that is resilient to some type of an attack or data poisoning attack, some such, right? There's certainly, adversarial perturbations you can incorporate and noise that you can incorporate into the training process to help it be more resilient. I think one of the areas that are of particular interest to me, right, from a resiliency perspective is, the supply chain. The supply chain sort of is a challenge, as tale as old as time, but I think it's really exacerbated and made even worse with a growing attack surface with, some of the AI-based solutions that we're using now, right, with large language models, even agentic AI solutions where, some of the existing scanning techniques, static or even dynamic analysis techniques that we might use on the aspects of the supply chain are no longer applicable, right? If a user goes and downloads a potential, infected model from, say, Hugging Face or some other data source, and we're seeing that even more commonly now because, once upon a time you could train a neural network or a CNN or something in your laptop or local compute resources, whereas now there's very few organizations that can actually train some of these large language models from scratch. So, once again, right, reducing the friction to compliance, people and governance, users have a mission, right? They want to be able to use some of these technologies and tools, so they might acquire it from, an unapproved a source. And there's a number of techniques, right, you can incorporate to protect against that, right, including, as David mentioned, the MLSecOps and, the evaluation of some of those tools that are being used, including like AI bills of materials and things like that.
Sure. So, Captain Rogers, can you help me get started? From this complex data supply chains that we go through in order to get our data from, an IoT device middle of Atlantic, what kind of internal process failures have you seen that can compromise AI data, and what are mitigation techniques or thought processes you have about that?
So I would just say, so we're trying to pull data from lots of different sources. I'll just give you all the landscape to some extent. 130, 150 systems or so inside the Coast Guard. The overall infrastructure of those systems, we'll just call it technology debt. because it is. I mean, some of these things are really, really old. They're built on terrible backbones. We have some really good stuff right now that like we can collect data from video cameras and so we call it sextant, where we're actually looking out with helicopters and we're able to see a lot of that stuff. You know the problem? Like, I have to unplug something when I get back and I have to plug it in. Like, so that by itself, I mean, that's got security issues. That's got, so the infrastructure of data transfer, like, it's not in place for the full extent of what I want. Now, I can also talk sensors, and then I'll just give you all the landscape on sensors. Like, there's a ton of sensor data out there, and what's fun about being the Coast Guard is, like, we don't even have to collect it for ourselves. Like, everybody will give us their sensor data because they recognize the value of us as an organization. What I don't have inside my data environment is the overall means to ingest and process data at that scale. So this is one of the things that I'm actually trying to broaden in the data environment that we have, is because I got, like he brought up with the whole word .mil. Well, we're .mil, we're .com, we're everything. The Coast Guard's like DoD plus, right? So it's Title 10, it's Title 14, it's Title 50. We're part of the national security, we do intel. We're the national intelligence. Anyway, we do all of it, right? And then everybody wants to work with us because we can do all of it. But think about that through a data lens. Like, that's crazy because the rules are fundamentally different on the .gov versus .mil, and to, let's just say, maintain our DODN certification, like, there's only certain things that I can run. So not only are we, like, we're multi-cloud, and there's new risks that are embedded into the fact that we're multi-cloud because I have to follow a whole set of different rules. Like, I wish I had a real clean answer for you, but this is why when I talk about this whole scaffolding. Like, if I can build the means, like the infrastructure around, like we're going to do it this way, guys. Like, this is how we're going to do it. And it fits because here's the checklist of what I got to do if I'm DODN, but we're using these processes. This is the checklist for .gov, but, we're going to use these processes. And we got to make sure that our data environment can cover all domains, high side, low side, like all of it, that I can process sensor data, that I can, like, that's it's an all domain, all approach thing that we can all work in. Then we can all have that same conversation. But again, we're back to my little game, right? Getting everybody to actually not just understand it, like, you got to understand it and you got to buy in. Or maybe I can just do the Jedi thing and you can just do what I tell you. But that's not been my experience. If y'all know how to do that, by the way, like, would love to know how. So anyway, so that's a lot of our difficulty on the security piece, is because I don't have the infrastructure to be pulling data, especially sensor data, from just wherever. And again, that's not unique to us. Others are having those kinds of issues as well. Partnerships tends to be how we go through our approach to trying to solve some of these problems, though.
One of the things I've been, with my other role and even working where I work now, federal, state, local, tribal, the FedSeb, the military, the intelligence community. One of the things I've been trying to get around some of that those problems of bringing back the data and being custodial of it. There are different reasons. Law enforcement has a reason. National security has a reason. But I try to equate it to, I feel like sometimes we don't need more haystacks, we just need really chrome needles. So there's a lot of movement in the AI environments to try to edge process, right? Get an indicator. So instead of training on raw data, you're composing the data, leaving it where it is for things like PCNI or PII. I think the biggest joke I had in the last few weeks was we were doing a cyber thing, and I was like really confused with the privacy impact, and I went, machines don't have privacy laws that I remember. Not yet, but I think that's a way to help with that scaffolding, is to get that into a tiered approach. The technology complements it. They've been doing it in, e-commerce for decades. They've been doing it in manufacturing for decades. We just are doing it for a different reason. And I think the next thing you're going to see is composites that take the data at the edge, bring back indicators, and then run models against indicators. So different haystacks, different needles.
Thank you.
Can I say something? No, I think it's a change of culture. So you reference AI data. Believe it or not, all the data in enterprise is AI data.
Everything.
Yeah, and I think, again, the shift, when you guys all leave here, think about it this. All the data that's generated or going to be generated or has been legacy, it's AI data. And again, injecting that change, there's some models that we can run today, or there's models that we're going to run in the future. A lot of things, questions we haven't even asked yet, we're going to ask. And so just getting everybody ready, getting that shift in culture, but everything's AI data.
Thank you, Dick. Maybe you can help me with the next answer.
Oh, man.
It's you again. So David brought up an interesting point about frameworks, right? So with the current cybersecurity frameworks, they're obviously not addressing AI, the data threats and new models and all that. So how do you even wrap your arms around that? Are they're adequate, not adequate? If they're not adequate, where do we go from here?
So my stance is a little bit different. So in this discussion, it all comes down to a landing zone. So us, in particular, we're multi-cloud. We have a landing zone. That landing zone is protected by a security stack, and there is guardrails that we have to have in place. We need to continuously optimize that. So in order for us to protect whatever AI model, you're going to have to protect the landing zone. And that, is, of course, is the application that's creating data. You have models that are actually being used, actually creating new data. So again, the answer is going to come back to the landing zone. And if anyone familiar what a landing zone is, it's where you have, for our particular, we have multiple clouds. There's a spread of common shared services. So for a larger enterprise, you want to make sure that you have that landing zone that can accommodate whatever model, whatever tool, whatever DevSecOps, have a centrally managed CI/CD pipeline behind the same stack, and to ensure that you have visibility. So with the examination is in just the actual landing zone, you have to look at the processes. So as we do change management, it's all of the different lenses that are needed. And it's unlike what we've done in the past with traditional RMF with a checklist. You're now looking a little bit more on the processes and things that the change management. What does that actually mean? Well, then, as especially in cloud and as especially in AI, you're constantly changing the ecosystem, and you constantly have to be trace of where you were and where you're going. And so, again, a completely different mindset. And I think a plug is the talent needed to do this. We really need to grow our talent. Again, the different lenses that I mentioned isn't what we aren't available in the groups that we have. So growing this community is important. And I'm glad you all are here. Again, when you leave here, please spread the joy. Get more people to learn the new culture, the new way of thinking, because this isn't stopping. But I'm sort of preaching now.
How many have heard the term CATO out there? Continuous authority to operate.
Yeah.
Come on, raise your hand. You've heard it. Yeah. Okay.
CATO.
Do you know what it is? So basically, to tie into the landing zone, you certify the provider. That's done through FedRAMP in the government. I've worked on both sides. I've worked in the financial industry where we did the same thing. Then you certify the services. And then you certify the deltas in the services that you're using that are unique. And you have a constant established framework, scaffolding, whatever you want to call it, to keep that continuously moving. Do you know what happens if you don't? I can tell you I worked for a $100 billion bank a few years back, and I had to stop all cloud deployment in the middle of the summer. The board of directors did not like me. I was the head of data protection and cloud security. And I said, I can't accept the risk anymore. I'll get, and I like my security clearance. I like my reserve duty. So I wasn't going to lie to federal regulators ever. And so I stopped it because the backlog of applications, or in this case, pipelines for data, because we were already doing AI work back then. It started to just, grind to a halt because we were trying to redo this thing every time. And I'm like, all you need is a Delta ATO, or, you need to do the 60 controls. Don't give me a package with 920. All I need to know is about the differences to the landing zone and the observability of it. As Derek was saying, I mean, if you look back, that is going to be the key, as he said, to getting to scale with any type of artificial intelligence, large language models, machine learning, hypercompute. It's the same problem. And it doesn't mean, the problem is the human observability of the machines as they're running, right? The reason that you won't trust is because you can't see.
Great point. So I request the audience to get ready for the questions for Derek and Captain Rogers. so let the last question I have, and maybe if you can provide just a quick thing. What role does explainability play in validating the integrity of AI outputs based on input data quality? We spoke.
So explainability is a really fun one. So because I don't know, I'll just give you all a quick story. So I was having a conversation with a guy about data and like what we're doing with data. He's actually a ship driver that's coming in. He's going to be the executive assistant of one of the 3 stars. And so I give him like a 40-second, I mean, not even long, like 40 seconds of like, hey, here's what we're doing in the data world. And then I get to the end and he goes, you lost me at data. So I'll be honest, I'm not sure what value explainability has because I don't feel like I'm that hard to understand. And I cannot explain this to anybody. So maybe this goes back to the whole, we don't have the right workforce that actually like has grown up in this to understand what we're saying. Because I'm trying to keep it as basic as I can. And I know that's not what you mean by explainability, but like I feel like that's a big part of this, is that if I can't give you the basics, then explainability on a math basis on how we did this, and again, we can go back to the whole nodal large language model, like good luck with explainability on how nodes work on multinodal analysis. I mean, the math's there, like good luck doing it. But I don't know, the problem we have as regulators, and I'll just jump into this as a government, right? I can't regulate that which I cannot explain. And I think that's it by itself, is that I can't use AI through a regulatory lens. Otherwise, I just think about it through a legal framework. How am I going to get this past lawyers to verify that I'm doing the right things if I can't explain the models I'm using to make those decisions? So this goes to the whole agentic approach that we want to use. So you make it a part of what you do, but it doesn't become the full overall rationale and basis of what you do. So explainability has to marry with the math components of this so that we can actually explain to people, and again, assuming they understand anything about data, which is a big assumption sometimes.
Captain,
I think Derek has
come to my
answer.
class and teach because that was a good explanation of explainability. It was probably one of the best I've heard, so it was good.
But Derek, you have the answer, right?
The answer?
Yeah.
Oh, man. As I started this, I said I was a therapist, preacher, janitor. But, as a CTO, my job, I'm teacher, right? These are very complex. I have different audiences, like with you today and a senior leader tomorrow, or again, new recruit. You sort of have to explain it and to be able to, for them to consume this. I love the analogies that you've used. Good approach. But as we use these advanced technologies, the models, et cetera, AI, machine learning, we all have to be able to explain it, but also defend it. I think explaining it is also the flip side is defending it, because again, there's going to be some different opinions. But it's a never-ending, because again, with all the things that change, you got to come up with new analogies and new ways to explain it, and that's a never-ending pursuit.
Actually, I want to give you a little bit more. So one of the things that we've been struggling with in the Coast Guard is executive decision-making. And we use collaborative overall leadership in the way that we do things, right? So we want everybody to kind of be in agreement, right? Because, again, across the breadth of the mission sets, we might not have everything that we need. But one of the things I was explaining to them is if you want to speed up executive decision-making, your answer is data. Right? Because only one of 3 reasons for not being willing to make a decision. You don't have what you need to decide, right? You don't feel like you can justify what you decide. That's a lot more related to the explainability piece. Or you don't have the gumption to decide. It's one of the 3, right? We'll set aside the third one, right? Because that's not really very nice. Wow. But the other 2 are super built off of data And what happens is, and this is the risk model, and we all do this as employees, so this isn't unique to my organization. So before you start laughing at me, like you're looking back at yourself, the way it works is like if you're not comfortable making the decision, you push it to your boss, right? But what happens when your boss gets the decision? Their risk lens, like what they're factoring into the overall decision landscape, is more than what you are. And again, I'm making assumptions here. Bosses are better than us, right? And that's one of the assumptions embedded into this. That this is a genuine boss. This is a boss that actually understands what they're doing to a greater extent than you do, right? Just build that into the assumption. And I mean that for real. But if that's true, they have a larger risk landscape than they're considering than you are. And their decision then is harder than yours. So, and if you didn't have what you needed to make the decision, you as you push it up, and then he doesn't have what he needs or she doesn't have what she needs, and it pushes up again, and it keeps going up, it gets harder and harder and harder, and then we actually arrest the whole organization. We can't decide. And all of that, the solution ultimately rests in data, which is why this whole foundation, because, okay, now let's make it really interesting from a math perspective. I just explained how people make decisions. How do you think AI makes decisions? It's the same framework, except more simplistic than the way that a human does, right? So same thing. If I don't have the right data, the AI is not going to decide for me either. And so that's probably the best way I know to like really foot stomp the whole purpose of this. Like that's where we need to go. The data has to be there, and if we don't have it, like garbage in, garbage out.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Bobby, how about I put you on the spot here and talk about explainability tool sets or support mechanism that you folks have been looking into the future in the crystal ball of yours?
Yeah, we've incorporated a lot of different explainability sort of metrics and approaches, and I'm not sure that I have a more succinct or better description than the one you've heard up here today, right? There's certainly going back to sort of first principles and statistical approaches. There's Lime, there's SHAP, there's those types of approaches that we've used in the past that are absolutely critical, right? Especially one of the things that we have learned, that I've learned in particular, is when you're developing one of these AI models, if it performs very well, you better be able to explain why it performs well, right? Because that's oftentimes a smell test for maybe there's some kind of bias in your data set that's leading you to overperform. And certainly if you're not performing well, to also revisit those explainability metrics to understand kind of, hey, why is it not performing well? Where do I maybe have a noise in my data set? I also think there's sort of another principle to consider as we brought up the agentic type of solutions, the agentic type of workflows. Maybe in the past we might have treated these AI systems as black boxes, right? Put in as much data as you possibly can into the black box and then hopefully get a reasonable answer out of it, right? But I also think there's sort of a decomposition, an explainability by design, if you will, approach towards how you structure the decision making in your AI systems to move towards increased autonomy and kind of explainability in your AI systems.
Any last thoughts, David?
I think it's really funny. We talk about artificial intelligence, and very few people focus on the second word. We're all intelligent. We're all intelligent in different things. We all have heuristics that impact us every day. We all are on a different journey of parts, and that goes back to everything we talked about here. We were exposed to different data. We were exposed to different times. We have different capacities and different, maybe even biological predispositions for certain types of activities. So if you take that and then you add the artificial on top of it, it just means the machine's doing it and you're not doing it. And the explainability is funny because I think when I was working for one of the companies that'll remain nameless, we had an engineer who said, I think this AI is got the cognizance of a 7-year-old. And I wanted to ask him, have you ever had a 7-year-old? I've had 3. Not one of them could I explain, right? I mean, on a daily basis, right? I mean, and that's just proof of this whole thing. You're looking at something that I don't think it does have that cognizance, right? It can be manipulated in ways. If I wish I could have manipulated my 7-year-olds in that way, but the beauty in it and the thing that you want to watch, whether it's bias, whether it's cyber, whether it's whatever, is you'll get to the point where it'll make assumptions that you never thought you could make. I'll give you a cyber example. It's really kind of cool. You have antivirus, all these things, and I've watched multi-virtual execution engines that are AI-driven slow down when the virus scanner comes up, right? And then you'll start to see this, and then the normal way to deal with that is to bend space and time and just increase the frequency, right? So you get the thing to wonk. Well, once they're infused with AI, they don't, which is really interesting, right? It's learning that if I do this, then this comes up. So when that punch-counter punch comes, if you're not meeting it with the same type of asymmetric thought, you're probably on the losing end. So this is why we need it. This is why it's important. This is the funny story about how it gets us there. And everyone here on the panel has just described it. All goes back to just making sure that you get everything in that you can. It doesn't, sometimes you can't. I always say it. I think it was a George Carlin joke that said, you can't have everything. Where would you put it? I've heard people say, I need all the data in the world to do this. I'm like, well, we can't afford it. And do you really? And so there's fine lines in there. So I think the core thing that I'd put out there is be pragmatic and take a little bit of joy in it. I mean, I didn't walk into it. I complained to my chief data officer before, and probably insulted the poor guy back at the bank because I didn't understand. But now I do, and now I've seen proof of it. And if you can equate it back to everyday things that you do and how it's improving your life, then you have a mission to go and try to improve the nation or improve the mission with it. So try to get there.
Thank you, panelists. This has been a wonderful hour of learning. Thank you, David, Bobby, Derek, and Captain Rogers. Appreciate it. Any questions, please step up to the mic in the center. And obviously, the panelists are here for a few minutes while I entice them with a free adult beverage.
Good afternoon or good evening, or if you watch Big Bang Theory, good pre-evening. Three things. I understood my 7-year-olds. My 17-year-olds were the challenge.
Mine just got worse, sorry.
So as we go to the work first and the explainability, I think one of the other big problems we have here is the youngest person here is the captain. So it's kind of scary when you look at it. The final thing is Mr. Kitlinski. I hope I said that right.
I'm Derek.
Derek.
Yeah.
You said think differently. Then you never really explained exactly what you meant by think differently or gave examples of thinking differently. So what type of different thinking would you think of in order to do data security within the AI thing? With that, thank you very much.
Think differently. So I'll say this. When I had this interview for a job a while ago. It was actually a couple of years ago, a number of years ago. And the question they asked is what is the greatest cybersecurity threat? I'll ask you, what is the greatest cybersecurity threat today? My answer is AI. And actually, when I learned about it, before AI, I learned about cybersecurity, but then actually when you learn about AI, think differently of how you can employ. We're all thinking about ChatGPT. I'm asking you to think differently. How can you employ AI as a bad actor? As people outside in China, they're doing that today. So again, we're all thinking of it as to improve into the AI is, for us mission data decision driven, but think about it as a bad actor who can employ AI against us. And a lot of people don't even think of it that way. So that's one example. Just think differently.
Thank you. Paul?
So I have kind of a really simple question, and you're talking about training that we need smarter people. And it's the same thing with cybersecurity. The problem is that we set such high standards. A lot of people think I have to be brilliant to go into cybersecurity, and that's just not true. So is there a model out there, say in medicine, where people can come in and then focus, or Are we just setting ourselves up the same way we've done with cybersecurity, where people either fall into, I've got to be a brainiac, I'm going to make $1 million day one, which they're not, or two, I'm just not even going to try, because you need somebody like that?
I'm going to answer that question, because that question is near and dear to my heart, and especially when my role in the Army, where it's amazing that I had the ability of hiring a whole team, and especially in the government, the skill sets I needed doesn't exist. And so one of the things what I look for in the people I seek is the willingness to learn. I mean, especially with all of the landscape that we all deal with just out at this table, you're not going to have somebody that's going to be an expert in all of this. But especially how fast this is moving, the gauge of the people that I like to hire is the willingness to learn. And
But ultimately, that's not an education problem, that's a management problem.
it's a little bit of both.
I mean, because as a manager, if your employee doesn't understand how to do their job, that is your problem. And it's essentially been created by you. Now, you might not have the resources to bring those people in, but then that's a problem above you. It's not the individual.
It's especially in my role, I was gauging the person, right, and giving them the access. Literally, knowing that once I give you the skill sets, they're going to be gone because they're going to be highly marketable. But in that time, again, giving them the exposure to whatever things that they needed, and again with the diversity and everything else that are needed. But I think we're getting kicked out.
Let me try to answer your question too, though, because I think there's an important piece to this, and I do think it's a managerial thing to some extent, but to what extent are you willing? They're going to get us one light at a time. To what extent? I mean, it's the same problem we're having. Actually, let's go to middle school math. You know how hard it is to teach middle schoolers math, and a lot of it is just in their own heads they go, I can't do this.
Right.
So to what extent, how do we build the markers on you can do this, right? And I can help you actually get there. And I'll give you a quick one. He talked about culture change several times, and my perspective on culture change is a little different because I don't think you actually change culture a whole lot. So, but what you can do, and I think the best way that you get people to change is to convince them they already have. So, and I'll give you a quick example. So, Alexander Hamilton, the founder of the Coast Guard, which was in the Treasury Department, because how do you win a Revolutionary War? Smuggling. Once you actually have won a Revolutionary War and you want to actually have a legitimate government, what do you got to get rid of? Smuggling. So that's the origin of the Coast Guard. So, and what they would do then is he made all the revenue cutter CEOs write him long form letters. And so that's why he was as informed as he was as the Treasury Secretary. That's data. So to say that what we're doing today is fundamentally different than what was done 230 years ago is a misstatement. We're using different tools. We're using different approaches. And I think from a developmental perspective, what you do is you give them those markers along the way to show them that, nope, you can do this. And now let me show you, oh, you can do this. And then all of a sudden now you have credentials and you have capability, and then I have the workforce that I require.
I think that's a really good point. So AFCEA has done a white paper on how do you get education in cybersecurity to where we need to be, and you're having the same kind of conversation with AI. So I think this is a really good conversation, but it's a really circular kind of.
All right, thank you. I don't have night vision goggles to get out of here, so we need to wrap this up. Thank you so much, panel. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, audience, for hanging out and